Where are you calling from?
Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Good morning, you're on the air.
Oh, I'm on the air right now?
Yep.
Oh, yeah, well, I read something in the New York Times last month that I tried to get through, and I just couldn't get through to mention it. And it was an article about the election reform hearing that was held last month, and the last paragraph said, Senator Bennett from Utah invoked what he called the most celebrated cases of election fraud, all involving Democrats, Truman, Kennedy, and Johnson. And first, although I am more of a Democrat than a conservative, I will admit that I think JFK probably stole that 1960 election with a little mob help, and I also believe that Bill Casey was right when he wrote in his book about World War II that FDR withheld evidence from Kimmel and Short that the Japanese ships were steaming towards Pearl Harbor. But I believe at least as strongly that Casey, Reagan, and Bush stole the 1980 election by working with the Ayatollah to keep those hostages until the Republicans took office. Now, let me give just one piece of evidence.
Well, why don't you tie all three of those things together into election reform?
And to election reform?
That's where you started this conversation. Do you have a question or anything?
Well, Senator Bennett's comment really got my goat because I feel that it's such a controversial issue about the 1980 election. I feel like newspapers like the USA Today and mainstream newspapers really won't talk about it. So I would recommend that anyone who cares go to Robert Perry's news site, consortiumnews.com, and read his October Surprise X-Files on this.
Appreciate it. He started out talking about election reform. Is that still alive and well in Congress?
Well, no. I mean, it's still alive, but I would say it's not necessarily moving very quickly. And I think people are afraid, really, to make changes in the election law because they're afraid it's going to have some untold consequences on one party or another. And so both parties are moving very cautiously. And the one distinction I would make in what the caller was talking about is that these hearings on election reform are really not so much focused on fraud as they are on the idea that people who voted didn't get counted. And it wasn't so much because of fraud, but because of malfunctions in the machines or just problems in the way ballots are tallied. And so I think that's the issue that people are grappling with. And again, it's a question of money and federal involvement. Should the federal government get into what has been traditionally a state's role and help provide some of the money to run some of these elections and buy some of this equipment?
I went through and talked to a number of secretaries of state around the country. One of